Okay, so this program here is the FileDirector Config program, and all it's effectively doing is setting up the settings, shall we say, and when you kind of OK it or apply it, it writes these settings to a config file. So if we look along here, the very first thing is the description of the server, the session timeout. So if you have concurrent licenses, you can set at what point, and somebody hasn't, sorry, if you have a concurrent license or a named license and somebody leaves their computer idle, you can actually set how long before those licenses are automatically logged out. So by default it's 30 minutes, but you can change that if you want. So if you wanted it to be 10 minutes, then it just means that the licenses will be freed up more quickly. You can change the default license of the application. If we go into users and groups, then this is where we control who has access to the system. So we've got a few choices here. You can either create your own built-in domain, which means you could administer the users from within inside FileDirector Enterprise Manager. You can use the users on your computer. So if you don't have a Microsoft Active Directory, you might just want a standalone server, and to create the users on the server, then you would tick the kind of this computer box. Alternatively, you could tick the domain. If you're working on an Active Directory, you can tick the domain. Then by default, FileDirector needs to create some user groups. These are the FD admins. You've then got the sort of FD scan names. These are named scanning users, concurrent scanning users, named ordinary users, and concurrent users. If you click the create button, it will generate those groups. We normally do that as part of the installation. And down here is the service account, so FD server, and where does he belong to? Well, that account belongs to the local computer in this instance. Otherwise it could be a service account on the domain. You key in a password here, and then you make sure that that password doesn't expire somewhere else. The next connection up here is the database. So if you're using SQL Express, then it's normally the name of the PC that's running it / SQL Express, and 9 times out of 10 you're going to use integrated Windows security. If you've got a full-on SQL server, then you can change that up here to just the server name. You don't need the /SQL on there or anything. You can tell it what version of SQL you can use. If you don't want to use integrated Windows security, you can put the username and password down here of the database connection. And then down here we've got some other kind of settings which you seldom need to change. But the default database location, that will actually be the path on the actual SQL server. So for example, if you have a separate SQL server, it's all sort of documented in the manual, you would need to put a / server name in, and then the folder path, you need to make sure that the FD server account has right permissions. So that's quite important. Sorry, one other setting here which is quite useful is the maximum number of hits in the hit list. When you're in WinClient and you click search all, you'll notice that it stops at 1,000. You can override that if you want to and put a new value in. When you click in license, you have the get license button. Now that will go off to the Spielberg licensing server with your serial number here, and if there's a update your license, it will appear. If you're buying new extra licenses, say extra user licenses, and we advise you that it's been the license has been updated, you just hit get license there, and it goes off to the server, comes back, and then tells you if there's any changes. When we go into license options, this is where we get to see what you do have licensed. So in my little test edition here, I've got it's enterprise, site replication is enabled, process management enabled, etc, etc. But down here you'll see what your user link is. So for example, I have 2 concurrent users, 2 name users, blah blah blah. The other thing is the maintenance. If you run out of support and you don't renew, then you can't use the latest version of the software. You can only use the version up until when your maintenance expired. So big tip, always keep your maintenance up to date through us or your provider. Branding. Now this is a update to the config files, so this tells your users where they're going to find their FileDirector server. So if we change that to something else, / FileDirector, and we click the branding button, it just means that when they download and install the software, the path for the server will be changed. The other tick box you can enable as part of the branding exercise is whether the users will need to put in the username and password, or whether they'll be automatically logged in with their domain account, like their single sign-on Windows password. Hitting the branding button here just flashes up a load of screens, which means it's updated the config XML files. Finally, on the SMTP server, if you're using process management and you're going to be generating emails, then you might want to put in the SMTP path of your server. So eclipse.net, for example, what port it's on. You can use SSL authentication like Google, for example, and then down here you can put in some test stuff here to make sure that it's actually working. You generate an email. When you OK to everything, it just updates the config file. So there we go. Hope that was useful. Stop.